Cato was a man everyone in Abynia village knew. He was tall, strong, and full of pride. He had built his farm with his own hands, turning dry land into green fields. People often said, "Cato never gives up." He liked hearing that. It made him feel powerful and respected. But deep inside, Cato feared losing that respect more than anything else. He had married Layla 2 years ago. She was quiet and kind, with eyes that always seemed to understand more than she said. Cato loved her, though he never said it out loud. In his heart, he believed that a man should show strength, not softness. Layla was now expecting their first child, and that made Cato even more proud. He often told his friends, "My son will be strong like me." One sunny afternoon, the elders of Abynia gathered under the big baobab tree to discuss the new irrigation canal. Cato was there, sitting tall among them. Layla brought him food and water, walking softly and respectfully. But when one elder asked about the size of Cato's land, Layla spoke up. "It's not as big as he says," she said with a small smile. "But he works it well." The men around the circle laughed. It was not cruel laughter but playful. Still, Cato's chest grew tight. His wife had spoken in front of the elders, and corrected him. His pride cracked like dry wood. He forced a smile, but his heart burned. That evening when they returned home, Cato walked ahead without saying a word. Layla followed, confused. Inside their small hut, the air felt heavy. The sound of crickets outside only made the silence deeper. "Why did you say that before the elders?" he asked at last. His voice was calm, but his eyes were sharp. Layla looked at him gently. "I didn't mean harm, Cato. I was only speaking the truth." Cato frowned. "You made me look weak. A man should never be corrected by his wife in public." Layla lowered her head. "I'm sorry if I made you feel small. I only wanted to make them laugh, not hurt your name." But Cato's heart refused to hear her words. His pride was louder than his reason. He turned away and lay on his mat, pretending to sleep. Layla sat quietly in the dark, touching her belly. The baby kicked softly, as if reminding her that peace was more important than pride. The next morning, Cato left early for the farm. He worked hard under the sun, trying to bury his anger in the soil. But every swing of his hoe brought back the sound of the elders' laughter. He imagined them whispering, "Even his wife corrects him." The thought cut him like a knife. When he returned home, Layla had cooked his favorite stew. The smell of groundnut and pepper filled the air. She smiled and said, "You must be tired, my husband. Eat and rest." But Cato only looked at her for a moment. "I will eat later," he said coldly. He stepped outside and sat alone under the tree near their hut. An old neighbor, Mama Asha, walked by and greeted him. "You sit alone, Cato. Is all well?" Cato nodded. "All is well." But Mama Asha had lived long enough to hear the truth behind words. She smiled gently and said, "Sometimes pride makes us forget who we love." Then she walked away, leaving Cato staring into the distance. That night, Cato lay awake. He could hear Layla breathing softly beside him. He wanted to turn to her to say he was sorry for his silence. But his mouth stayed shut. His pride chained his words. Days passed. Cato became quieter, harder. Layla noticed his distance but tried not to complain. She sang to their unborn child and prayed for peace in their home. Sometimes she spoke to Cato, but his answers were short. One evening as the sun went down, a friend named Tamba came to visit. He and Cato sat outside talking about farming. Tamba laughed and said, "Your wife is wise, my brother." When she spoke that day, even the elders smiled. "You are lucky to have her." Cato forced a smile. "A wise wife should know when to speak," he said sharply. Tamba's face grew serious. "Do not let pride steal your joy, Cato. You have a good woman. Many men wish for what you have." Cato said nothing. But after Tamba left, his words stayed in Cato's mind like a song that would not fade. That night, rain began to fall softly. The wind carried the smell of wet earth. Layla shivered and drew her shawl around her shoulders. She looked at Cato and said, "Come inside, the rain is cold." Cato hesitated, then followed. As they sat by the small fire, Layla said quietly, "Cato, do you remember the day we planted our first yam? You said we must work together, hand in hand. Why can we not do the same now?" Cato stared at the flames. He wanted to answer, but words failed him. In his heart he knew she was right. His anger had built a wall between them, a wall made of pride. The next morning, Cato woke up early. He walked to the farm, but instead of working he sat under a tree. He thought about his wife, his child, and the laughter that had wounded him. He realized that it was not the laughter that hurt, it was his own fear of being small. When he returned home, Layla was sitting outside weaving a small mat. Her smile was calm and soft. Cato looked at her for a long moment. "You did not mean to shame me," he said quietly. Layla looked up, surprised. "No, my husband. I only spoke without thinking." Cato nodded. He sat beside her. The silence between them was different this time, warm, not cold. The birds sang and the wind moved through the trees like a whisper of peace. Cato finally smiled. "You are stronger than I thought," he said. Layla laughed lightly. "And you are kinder than you show." He reached out and touched her hand. "Forgive me, Layla." She nodded, tears shining in her eyes. "Always." That night, Cato lay beside her, listening to the quiet rhythm of her breathing and the soft movements of the baby within her. He realized that true strength was not in pride but in love, the kind that listens, forgives, and grows. And from that day on, Cato promised himself that no laughter, no word, no mistake would ever make him forget what truly mattered. That night, silence filled Cato and Layla's small hut. The fire had gone out, but the air was still hot with anger. Cato sat on one side of the room, staring at the wall. Layla sat on the other, her hands resting gently on her stomach. The baby inside her kicked, as if feeling the tension between its parents. Layla wanted to speak, but Cato's hard eyes stopped her. She had never seen him like this before. His face looked cold and his jaw was tight. Every few minutes, he took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm inside him, but his pride was stronger than his peace. When she tried to move closer, he turned his face away. "Do not speak to me tonight," he said in a low, sharp voice. Layla's heart sank. She nodded silently and stayed where she was. She wanted to tell him she was sorry again, that she had never meant to hurt him, but she knew that words would only make things worse. So she prayed quietly, asking for patience and understanding. Outside, the crickets sang and the moonlight fell through the cracks of their hut. But for Cato there was no beauty that night, only anger. He felt as if everyone in the village had laughed at him. He kept hearing their voices in his head, and every time he did, his heart grew harder. By morning, Cato had made up his mind. As the first light touched the village, he stood up, washed his face and spoke without looking at Layla. "Go back to your parents," he said. Layla turned to him in shock. "What are you saying, Cato?" He didn't answer right away. He walked to the door, then faced her with cold eyes. "A wife who disrespects her husband cannot stay in my house," he said firmly. Layla's lips trembled. "I only spoke without thinking," she said softly. "I never wanted to shame you." But Cato did not listen. "You have brought shame to my name," he said. "You will stay with your parents until you learn respect." Tears filled Layla's eyes. She could hardly believe the man before her, the man who once held her close and promised never to let her go. She looked around their small home, her eyes resting on the mat they had woven together, the pot they had bought at the market, and the small blanket she had made for their baby. Everything in that hut held a memory. Slowly she stood up. She packed her few clothes and the small wooden carving of a bird Cato had made for her before they married. She placed her hand on her stomach and whispered a prayer. "O Lord, give my husband peace. Soften his heart." When she stepped outside, the morning sun was bright and warm, but her world felt cold. The path to her parents' home was long, dusty, and quiet. She walked slowly, her back aching, her heart heavy. Along the way, an old woman named Mama Asha saw her and called out, "Layla, where are you going so early?" Layla forced a small smile. "To my parents' home," she said softly. Mama Asha frowned. "Did something happen?" Layla shook her head, but the tears in her eyes told the truth. The old woman sighed. "A wise woman knows when to be silent, but a wise man knows when to forgive," she said gently. "May peace find you both." Layla thanked her and continued walking. When she reached her parents' house, her mother came out quickly, surprised to see her. "My daughter, what is wrong?" Layla fell into her mother's arms and cried. "He sent me away," she whispered. Her mother held her tightly. "Oh, my child," she said. "Men can be proud, but time will teach him." Her father came out and looked at her with sad eyes. "Cato is a good man, but pride blinds even the best of hearts," he said. "You will stay here until he comes for you." Days turned into weeks. Layla helped her mother around the house, cooked and rested. Sometimes she would sit by the window watching the road, hoping to see Cato coming to take her home. But he never came. At night, she spoke softly to her unborn child. "Your father is angry," she said, rubbing her belly. "But he will learn. He loves us even if he has forgotten for now." Back in Abinia, Cato worked on his farm every day, trying to bury his guilt beneath the soil. He told himself he had done the right thing. A man must stand by his word, he thought. But when the sun went down and the sky turned dark, he missed the sound of Layla's laughter. He missed the way she greeted him with food and a smile. Sometimes he walked past the small garden where she used to plant herbs. The plants had started to wilt. He stopped once and touched one of the dry leaves, feeling something twist inside him. "Why should I care?" he said aloud, but his voice cracked. One afternoon, Cato went to the village well. There he overheard two women talking. "Layla's baby will be born soon," one said. "She is still at her parents' home," the other replied. "Her husband has not come for her." "How sad." Cato turned away quickly. His heart began to beat faster. He didn't want them to see his face. That night he couldn't sleep. He thought about the baby, the small life growing far away from him. In his dreams he saw Layla walking down the dusty road, her eyes full of tears. He woke up sweating, whispering her name. "Layla." The next morning he stood at the door of their hut, staring at the empty mat. The house was too quiet. Even the birds outside seemed to sing softer. He picked up the small wooden carving of the bird that she had taken before, but then he realized it was gone. She had carried it with her. That made him smile a little, then frown again. Days passed slowly. The people of Abinia began to notice his loneliness. One old man said, "A man without his wife is like a drum without sound." Cato tried to ignore them, but his heart ached. He began to understand that sending her away had not brought him respect. It had brought him emptiness. Meanwhile, at her parents' home, Layla grew weaker as her time came near. Her mother sat beside her one night and said, "You still love him, don't you?" Layla nodded. "Yes, Mama. He is my husband. I pray every day for his heart to change." Her mother smiled sadly. "Then keep praying, my child. Even the hardest rock softens under rain." That night, as Layla drifted to sleep, she dreamed of her home in Abinia, the sound of the wind, the smell of the farm, and Cato's voice calling her name. When she woke, she whispered, "One day he will come." Back in Abinia, Cato sat outside under the stars, the same stars that shone above Layla. For the first time he whispered a prayer of his own. "If I was wrong, show me the way," he said quietly. The wind moved through the trees as if carrying his words to where Layla slept. And though they were apart, that night both hearts began to soften. His pride, her pain, and the story of forgiveness was only beginning. News travels fast in a village. By the third week after Cato sent Layla away, the story had reached the ears of the elders. People whispered about it at the market, by the well, and under the big baobab tree. Some said Cato was too harsh. Others said he had done what any proud man would do. But the elders of Abinia believed that no home should be broken by anger. One warm afternoon, a messenger came to Cato's farm. "The elders want to see you," he said. Cato wiped the sweat from his forehead and frowned. "About what?" he asked, though he already knew. The messenger only bowed and left. Cato walked slowly toward the meeting place, trying to steady his thoughts. He told himself that he had done nothing wrong. "I am a man," he muttered. "A husband must be respected." Yet, deep inside, something heavy began to grow in his chest, a feeling he did not want to name. When he reached the baobab tree, the elders were already there, sitting in a circle on wooden stools. Their faces were calm but serious. Chief McKenna, the oldest among them, nodded for Cato to sit. The air was still, except for the sound of a goat bleating nearby. "Cato, son of Abedi," said the chief, "we have called you here because we have heard of trouble in your home." Cato bowed his head slightly. "There is no trouble," he said. "Only a lesson. My wife disrespected me before the elders, so I sent her to her parents to learn respect." A murmur passed among the old men. One of them, Elder Sephu, spoke next. His voice was soft but full of wisdom. "My son," he said, "what do you gain from a lesson taught through anger?" Cato frowned. "A man must protect his honor," he replied quickly. "If a wife speaks against her husband, others will laugh. They will say the man is weak." Elder Sephu smiled gently. "And now do they not speak of you still? But not as a strong man, as a man without his wife." The word struck Cato like a small stone. He looked down, his hands tightening on his knees. "I did what I thought was right," he said quietly. Another elder, old Quinto, leaned forward. His eyes were cloudy with age, but his voice carried weight. "Pride builds walls, not homes," he said slowly. "A husband and wife are like two hands. If one hand strikes the other, the body feels pain. But if they work together, they build something beautiful." Cato looked up sharply. "So you are saying I should ignore her disrespect? Should I let her speak before men as if she were my equal?" Chief McKenna shook his head. We say that love is not weakness. A man's strength is shown not in anger but in patience. You have sent away a woman carrying your child. Is that strength or blindness? The question hung in the air like smoke. Cato wanted to answer, but the words caught in his throat. The elder's eyes were on him, not harsh but sad, as if they saw something he could not. After a long silence, Cato stood up. I have heard your words, he said stiffly. But I cannot take back what is done. Elder Sephu nodded slowly. The river cannot flow backward, my son. But it can change its path. Cato left the circle and walked away, his heart pounding. The elder's words echoed in his mind, heavy and sharp like stones. Pride builds walls, not homes. Love is not weakness. He tried to shake them off, but they stayed with him, following him like shadows. When he reached his farm, the sky had begun to darken. He sat under a mango tree and stared at the land he had worked so hard to build. Without Layla, it felt empty. The house was clean but cold, the fields green but silent. He thought about her laugh, the way she used to sing while pounding yam, the way she touched her belly and smiled. That night, Cato could not sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the elders' faces. He heard the words again, pride builds walls, not homes. He tossed and turned until the moonlight faded. The next day he went to the river to clear his mind. The sound of flowing water calmed him. As he sat there, an old fisherman named Juma came by. You look troubled, Cato, he said, sitting beside him. Cato sighed. The elders think I am wrong. They say I should bring my wife back. Juma nodded thoughtfully. And what do you think? Cato stared at the water. I think they do not understand what it means to be laughed at by your own wife. The fisherman smiled. But maybe they understand something bigger. A wife is not a child to be punished. She is the other half of your strength. Cato didn't answer. He threw a small stone into the river and watched the ripples spread. Later that evening, as he walked back home, he saw two young boys arguing near the path. One of them shouted angrily, "You broke my stick." The other replied, "I said sorry." But the first boy turned away and crossed his arms, refusing to listen. Cato watched them for a moment and realized how much they looked like him, angry, stubborn, and afraid to forgive. He smiled bitterly and shook his head. That night, he sat by his fire and whispered to himself, "Am I stronger than a boy who cannot forgive?" Days passed, but the elders' words stayed with him. When he worked on the farm, they whispered in the wind. When he went to the market, he saw other men walking beside their wives and felt a strange emptiness. One afternoon, as he returned from the fields, he found Elder Sephu waiting by his door. The old man smiled kindly. "You have been quiet, my son," he said. Cato nodded. "There is much to think about." Sephu sat down beside him. "A proud man may win every argument," he said, "but he loses his peace. Go to your wife, not to beg but to build again." Cato looked at him with tired eyes. "You think she will forgive me?" The elder smiled. "A heart that loves is like the earth, it always receives the rain." When Sephu left, Cato sat alone, thinking of Layla. He pictured her at her parents' home, maybe sitting by the fire, her belly heavy with their child. The thought made his heart ache. For the first time, Cato felt more sorrow than anger. He realized that his pride had not protected him, it had trapped him. It had made him alone. That night he stood outside his hut and looked at the stars. He remembered his father's words from long ago, "A man who cannot forgive will sleep beside his pride and wake beside his loneliness." Cato closed his eyes. He could almost hear Layla's voice in the wind, soft and warm. "Forgive and come home," it seemed to say. He took a deep breath and whispered, "Maybe it is time." But though his heart had begun to soften, his feet were still heavy with hesitation. The elder's words were still carving their way into his soul, teaching him slowly that true strength does not roar, it listens. And somewhere far away, Layla sat under the same stars, her hands resting on her stomach, whispering a prayer that one day her husband would find his way home. The rains had not come to Abynia for many weeks, and the land had grown dry and tired. The sky stayed clear, and the air felt heavy as if something was waiting to break. Cato worked on his farm every day, trying to forget the emptiness in his home. But no matter how hard he worked, the silence around him grew louder. Each evening, when he returned to his hut, he found only the sound of wind and crickets to greet him. Sometimes he sat outside, looking at the empty chair where Layla used to sit. He remembered how she would talk softly to the baby growing inside her and how her laughter filled the air like music. Now there was only the sound of loneliness. He thought of the elder's words, "Pride builds walls, not homes." And though he tried to push them away, they followed him like a shadow. Then one night, as Cato was about to sleep, He heard a deep rumble in the distance. The wind began to move through the trees, soft at first, then louder. The sky flashed with light, and thunder rolled like drums across the hills. Cato stepped outside and looked up. The clouds were thick and angry. "A storm is coming," he whispered. Soon the rain began, heavy, wild, and endless. It beat down on the roofs and fields with all its strength. The wind screamed through the village, tearing at branches and fences. Cato ran inside, but his small hut began to shake. Water poured through the roof. He tried to hold it together, using his hands and pieces of cloth, but the force of the storm was too strong. Lightning struck a tree nearby and Cato jumped. He grabbed what little food he had and ran to the corner of the room. The roof cracked, then fell in with a crash. Rain poured inside, soaking everything. Cato's fire went out, leaving him in darkness. He sat there, trembling, feeling the cold water on his skin. The crops he had worked so hard to grow were being washed away. His heart sank. "Everything I built is gone," he said softly to himself. "My wife, my child, my home." For the first time, Cato felt truly helpless. Pride had no meaning in the face of the storm. He realized how small he was against the power of nature, and against the power of love he had once taken for granted. When the storm finally began to calm, Cato was cold, wet, and weak. His roof was gone, his food was ruined, and his fields were covered with water. He could not stay there. He looked toward the hills and thought of only one place where he might find warmth: Layla's parents' home. At first he hesitated. The thought of facing her after what he had done filled him with shame. But another flash of lightning reminded him that he had no choice. With shaking hands he picked up his torn cloak and stepped into the rain. The road was muddy and rough. The rain still fell, though softer now. Cato's feet sank into the earth with every step. The night was cold and the wind cut through his clothes. He could hardly see the path, but he kept walking, guided only by the faint light from distant huts. As he walked, his mind was full of memories: Layla smiling as she cooked, the day they planted yams together, the moment she had left in tears. Each thought struck him harder than the rain. "I was a fool," he whispered. "A proud, blind fool." By the time he reached the edge of Layla's parents' home, dawn was breaking. The rain had stopped, but the sky was still gray. Cato stood there for a long moment, staring at the small hut. His heart pounded. He wanted to turn back, but his legs would not move. Finally, he took a deep breath and knocked gently. The door opened and Layla's mother gasped when she saw him. "Cato," she said. "What has happened to you?" He looked down, ashamed. "The storm took everything," he said quietly. "I have nowhere else to go." Her face softened. "Come in, my son," she said kindly. "You are welcome here." Cato stepped inside. The warmth of the fire hit him like a wave. He could smell food cooking, simple porridge, but it felt like a feast to his empty stomach. Then he saw her. Layla sat by the fire, wrapped in a blanket. Her hair was tied back and her face looked calm but tired. In her arms she held a small bundle. When she looked up and saw Cato, her eyes widened in surprise. For a long time neither spoke. The only sound was the crackling fire and the soft coo of the baby in her arms. Cato took a small step forward. "Layla," he whispered. She looked at him quietly, her eyes shining with both pain and peace. "You came," she said softly. Cato nodded, his voice trembling. "The storm destroyed everything. I had nowhere to go." His voice broke. "I was wrong, Layla. I let my pride push you away. And now I see, pride is nothing. I lost you and I lost myself." Layla looked down at the baby, who was sleeping peacefully. "You have not lost everything," she said gently. "You still have your son." Cato's heart stopped for a moment. "My son?" he whispered. She nodded and lifted the small bundle so he could see. The baby's tiny face was soft and round, his skin smooth like new clay. Cato's eyes filled with tears. He knelt beside her, afraid to touch the child at first. "He is beautiful," he said, his voice shaking. Layla smiled faintly. "He looks like you." Cato laughed quietly, though his throat was tight. "Then he will be stubborn," he said, trying to hide his emotion. Layla's mother came closer and said, "He was born during the first rain 2 nights ago. Maybe that is a sign. Even the sky cries before it blesses the earth." Cato looked at her gratefully, then turned back to Layla. "Can you forgive me?" he asked. "I thought I was strong, but I was only proud. I hurt you when I should have protected you." Layla was silent for a while. The firelight danced across her face. Finally she said, "Cato, anger and pride are like storms. They destroy everything in their path. But storms also bring new beginnings. Maybe this one was meant to teach us both." Cato lowered his head. I want to start again, he said softly. If you will let me. Layla looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded. We can start again. But this time we build with kindness, not pride. He smiled through his tears. Yes, my wife. The baby stirred and let out a small cry. Layla lifted him gently, and Cato reached out to touch the child's tiny hand. The baby's fingers wrapped around his thumb, and in that simple touch, Cato felt something he had not felt in a long time: peace. Outside, the rain began again, but this time it was soft and calm. The earth drank it gladly and the world smelled fresh and new. Cato looked around the small hut, feeling the warmth of the fire, the softness of the baby's breath, and the steady presence of Layla beside him. For the first time in many months, his heart was full, not of pride but of gratitude. And as the storm faded into morning light, Cato knew that the greatest lesson he had learned did not come from words or warnings, but from loss, and the love that waited patiently to forgive him. The morning after the storm, the sky over Abinia was bright and clear. The air was cool and the world smelled fresh like it had been washed clean. Birds sang in the trees, and the sound of dripping water echoed through the village. For the first time in many months, peace touched Cato's heart. He sat outside Layla's parents' hut, his hands folded and his head bowed. His clothes were still damp from the night before, and his body was sore from walking through the storm. But the pain in his heart was heavier than the pain in his body. He could not stop thinking about what he had done, how his pride had broken the home he had once dreamed of building. Layla came out quietly carrying their baby. She looked calm, her face glowing in the morning light. Cato looked up when he heard her steps. His eyes met hers, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. There was so much between them: anger, sorrow, love, and something deeper that words could not touch. Finally, Cato stood. His voice trembled as he said, Layla, I have no right to ask for anything. But I must say this: forgive me. He knelt before her, his hands shaking. I let pride blind me. I sent you away when I should have held you close. I hurt you when you needed love. I thought being a man meant being obeyed, but now I see, being a man means being kind. Layla looked down at him. Her eyes were soft but full of strength. She could still remember the pain of leaving his home, the long nights when she cried and prayed for peace. But as she looked at Cato now, broken, humbled, and honest, her heart began to heal. A home built on pride will always fall, she said quietly. But a home built on love can stand through any storm. Cato nodded, tears rolling down his cheeks. You are right, he whispered. I built walls instead of bridges. I chased respect from others, but I lost the respect of the one who mattered most. Layla stepped closer. The baby stirred in her arms, letting out a small cry. Cato reached out carefully and she let him take the child. He held the baby close, feeling the warmth and life in his small body. The baby's eyes opened slightly, and in that tiny gaze, Cato saw hope, hope for a new beginning. Layla watched him, her heart softening. She saw not the proud man who had sent her away, but the husband who had come back through rain and shame, searching for forgiveness. You are still his father, she said. And I will not take that from you. But if we are to be a family again, things must change. Cato nodded quickly. They will, he said. I will listen. I will learn. I will not let pride rule me again. I want to build a home where peace lives, a home where love and respect walk side by side. Layla smiled faintly, though her eyes were wet. Then we will begin again, she said. Slowly but truly. Cato bowed his head, unable to speak. He pressed his forehead against her hand and she did not pull away. Her touch was gentle, forgiving, and warm. Inside the hut, Layla's mother watched from a distance, a small smile on her face. She whispered a quiet prayer of thanks. The ancestors are kind, she said. They teach us through storms, but they never leave us without light. Over the next few days, Cato stayed in the village to help rebuild. He mended roofs, cleaned broken fences, and helped neighbors who had lost their homes in the storm. Every morning, he went to Layla's parents' house to see his wife and child. He brought food from the market, firewood from the hills, and stories to make her laugh. At first, Layla spoke little. She watched him with quiet eyes, unsure if the change in him would last. But as the days turned into weeks, she began to see that Cato's heart had truly changed. The pride that once guided him was now replaced by humility. One evening, as the sun set over the fields, Cato and Layla sat outside together. The baby slept peacefully in her arms. The sky was painted with orange and gold, and the sound of children playing drifted through the air. Cato looked at Layla and said softly, Do you remember when we planted our first yam field? Layla smiled. You wanted to plant them in a straight line. I said they should be in circles. He laughed quietly. And I told you I knew better. And you were wrong, she said with a grin. Cato nodded. Yes, I was wrong about many things. He reached out and took her hand gently. But if you let me, I will spend the rest of my life learning to be right about this, about us. Layla looked at him for a long moment. The light of the setting sun reflected in her eyes. Then let us build again, she said softly. And so they did. Cato rebuilt his home, not just with wood and clay but with care. He asked for Layla's advice and together they planned every detail. When it was done, the house stood strong and welcoming, filled with laughter and the sweet smell of cooking food. When people passed by, they no longer saw the proud man who once stood above others. They saw a man who walked with his head bowed in gratitude, who greeted his wife with respect, and who spoke kindly to all. The elders too noticed the change. One day the oldest among them called Cato to sit with them again. We have watched you, the elder said. The man who once let pride rule his heart now walks in peace. Tell us, Cato, what did you learn? Cato smiled humbly and said, I learned that pride is heavy but forgiveness is light. I learned that a man's strength is not in his voice, but in his heart. And I learned that love and respect must walk together or a home will fall. The elders nodded in approval. Then you have truly become a man of wisdom, they said. Cato returned home that evening to find Layla singing softly to the baby. He stood by the door and watched her for a while. Her voice was gentle, full of warmth and peace. When she looked up and saw him, she smiled and Cato felt that his heart, once broken and cold, was finally whole again. The baby stirred and reached for him and Cato took him in his arms. Together they watched the sky turn dark and the first stars appear. The air was quiet and the world seemed at rest. Cato whispered, Thank you, Layla. For what? She asked. For forgiving me. For teaching me what love truly means. She smiled and leaned her head against his shoulder. We both learned, she said. Forgiveness is not weakness. It is the seed of peace. And as the night wrapped around their small home, the three of them sat together, warm and safe, while the wind outside carried away the last traces of the storm. Cato closed his eyes and breathed deeply. The lesson was clear. A proud man can build many things but only a humble heart can build a home.